It's about the poncho and bell-bottoms gag. Some people thought it was real. It's not. I was just being silly. Professor Blackman.
So that I say potatoes.
Leonie Freeman. Susie Ferguson on tomorrow. I'm back. Huge volume coming about the golden spud recipes through email. Wednesday, I'll reply.
And go the Black Ferns.
Go the Black Ferns.
Yeah.
Checkpoint next. See you later.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, the super city's super-sized budget shortfall, $270 million. So what and who could be on the chopping block? Deputy Auckland Mayor Desley Simpson joins us. Hungry for change, the Whangārei teenager campaigning to put breakfast in other students' bellies. Waning immunity and second-time round COVID infections. Do masks need to make a comeback too? The whale of a battle over an ancient fossil hacked from rocks on a South Island beach, and the Auckland village facing an aerial assault. Pigeon poo, yep, a ton of it. Don't forget you can watch us on Sky Channel 83. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister is accusing banks making mega profits of not serving communities struggling with the cost of living. Bank profits are surging, with predictions the sector is set to post an annual profit of $10 billion. Westpac today reported its annual earnings had risen by 12%, hitting just over $1 billion. Jacinda Ardern says banks are operating within the rules but aren't using social licence. But she says the government doesn't have a solution.
I do share a view as, obviously someone that takes a perspective on the behalf of the welfare of all New Zealanders, that what we're seeing currently, I don't think is justifiable.
Jacinda Ardern says it's time banks operating in New Zealand consider if they're behaving the right way. Auckland's Deputy Mayor says it's not her intention to burden residents with steep rates rises to combat a tripling of its budget shortfall. Come next year, it's estimated the city's coffers will be $270 million in the red due to COVID revenue drops and rapid inflation and interest rate rises. Staff say a rates hike is possible as long as it doesn't create, quote, an unacceptable shock for households and businesses. Desley Simpson says she'd like to see the rises capped at the current planned 3.5%, but it will be a wider council decision.
Everyone's hitting. And I just don't think that there's absolutely no desire in my mind, nor I believe in the Mayor's, for putting just that problem directly on ratepayers. None at all.
Desley Simpson says all options are being considered, including selling assets. A Whangārei girls' high school student believes the government's free school lunches program is missing some of the people who need it most. Year 13 student Ocean Bishop Karonga estimates 300 of her peers turn up without food every day. Yet the school isn't among the 960 eligible for kaora kāko healthy school lunches. Ms Bishop Karonga says the equity index used to select schools doesn't take into account the inequality among her peers.
We've been identified as a number one school who has a lot of money in economics, so we weren't qualified for the healthy lunches, free lunches in our school. And it sucks that they put us in that category because not many of us, of course we do come from financial homes, but not everyone has the same economic rating as everyone else.
Ocean Bishop Karonga is petitioning Parliament for her school to be included. A murder trial in Whangārei has restarted after a fracas between the victim and defendants' families. For more than 30 seconds, threats, swearing and abuse were yelled at two brothers in the High Court dock, accused of killing Hayes Pehopa in a stabbing last June. His family were out of their seats and had to be restrained by security. One woman yelled, "You should have killed yourself." Ron Mansfield Casey is defending the younger brother who's accused of supplying the knife but not using it. The trial... Excuse me.
There were difference from...
I'm sorry, we'll move on without that audio. The trial is expected to take up to 2 weeks.
And search parties are still looking for a missing person thought to be a child after a boat capsized in Manukau harbour last night. Police have yet to confirm the age, but RNZ understands they're of primary school age. The boat, carrying 5 passengers, capsized off Clark's Beach. Police say 1 person died, 1 was rescued, 2 swam ashore, but 1 is still missing. A police spokesperson says they're not in a position yet to release details of the missing and dead. Helicopter and Coast Guard crews have been searching since early this morning. In sport, the Black Ferns have reflected on the culture shock for coach Wayne Smith when he joined the side as they build up to this weekend's World Cup final. Smith was called in to replace Glenn Moore, who resigned in April after a review into the Black Ferns management. Black Ferns forward Amy Rule believes music and laughter have been a large part of their success, which probably took Smith a while to adjust to.
Difference from the men's game, like heading in, they're like usually headphones on, real focus. We're focused too. We've got the music playing, we're connecting with each other, and I think that throughout all stages of rugby, it's just always come with us. So it's that culture, music, and just laughing, I would say, is a real key point for our team and a big part of the success we have.
Eden Park is on the verge of a sellout for the final. Danish teenage tennis player Holger Rune, who will play in Auckland in the new year, has become the first man to beat 5 top 10 players in the same ATP tournament after overcoming Novak Djokovic in the final of the Paris Masters. Arsenal are back at the top of English football's Premier League after a 1-0 win over Chelsea. Chris Wood scored in Newcastle's 4-1 win over Southampton, moving Newcastle to 3rd on the table. And Tom Brady has become the first NFL quarterback to reach 100,000 career passing yards. The 45-year-old 7-time Super Bowl winning quarterback reached his latest milestone in Tampa Bay's win over the Los Angeles Rams. Brady holds numerous NFL records and is one of only 2 starting quarterbacks to win the Super Bowl with 2 different teams. That's the news.
Pledging to save democracy.
One of those moments that you're going to look back on it years from now and know whether or not we met the moment based on the state of affairs 10, 15 years from now.
Poor polling for Labour.
Because for us as a government, it will be people, not polls. So I think regardless of what the numbers are, it shows that it will be, likely to be, a true MMP election.
And new political candidates join the race in Hamilton West.
I've always had aspirations to make the most optimal contribution to the country, and that contribution is going to be with the National Party.
The People's Choice Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, isolated showers turning to scattered rain this evening, rain becoming widespread for a time tomorrow. Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods. Tomorrow, a few spots of rain in Auckland and Coromandel. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mainly fine. Afternoon and evening showers about the ranges, plus central Hawke's Bay and the Tararua district today. From Waitomo to Kapiti, including the central high country, scattered showers, possibly heavy about the high country during the afternoons and evenings. Wellington, also Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine. Showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago, also Westland, Fiordland and Southland, fine breaks. A few showers about Fiordland and coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere for a time this afternoon and evening. And for Te Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow. The time is coming up to 7 minutes past 5. I'll have news, headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint te tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Forget potholes. Auckland Council has identified a monster money pit in the shape of a $270 million budget shortfall for next year, leading to speculation a 12% rates bump could be on the horizon. It blames rising inflation and interest rates. The blowout is $180 million higher than the $90 million previously forecast. The Mayor has signalled a forensic examination of spending and cost cutting is coming. His Deputy Desley Simpson had this message for the city's ratepayers.
I want to give Aucklanders confidence that it's certainly not my intention, nor I believe the Mayor's, to put the burden of what we now find is a kind of large shortfall directly on the ratepayer. Look, we've made significant savings last term. I think the total value for money and savings and efficiencies target last term was, well in excess of $500 million. But we have to show an even sharper attention to savings and efficiencies and opportunities within our business before looking at the ratepayers. And I think that's what ratepayers expect too.
So it's not your intention, but can you give them any guarantees? Can you tell them, OK, you're not going to have a rate increase that's more than 3.5%?
I can't say that because it's the Mayor's job to put together his budget, which he will be doing very shortly. But one of the great things about this Mayor is he's really good at reading a balance sheet, and he is really looking in a lot of detail at some of the expenditure and works that Council does, and really putting it through a bit of a fine-tooth comb. He's going to have that conversation with councillors, and once he's had that, I think I'll be in a better chance to give the confidence that you're looking for. But I do know that he is committed to looking inside the business first.
You can read a balance sheet too. You chaired the Finance Committee, right? Yes. So, for you personally, what would you like to see a rates increase sit at? 3.5%? Is that fair?
Lisa, I think that's what was in our intended rates increase from the LTP.
Correct.
I'm not going to, I think that's a reasonable target.
And you'd like to be able to stick with that, Desley?
I personally would like to, but I haven't had that conversation with the Mayor to see where he's going with it, and I wouldn't like to commit 100% until I've had that conversation with him. But as I said, I want to just confirm that it's the conversations that we have had around the subject, he's really clear he doesn't believe the burden needs to go on ratepayers.
In saying that, the report to the Council says tough choices and trade-offs about the mix of budget levers will need to be made given the scale of the challenge ahead. So, Desley, name one thing that you can cut.
There's a lot of options, and I don't want to say those myself until I've had a conversation with with the whole council team. I mean, one of the things.
What are your reckons, though, Desley?
No, Lisa, hold on. Let me just put that in context for you. One of the things I think is really important that we want to strengthen this term is a team approach to the problem. And if I turn around and say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that, that is not kind of the team approach I want. We haven't had a conversation as a council team, and that conversation has to occur first. Let me put it another way. I've got some ideas, but I'm not prepared to share it publicly with you without actually canvassing them within my council colleague team first.
Let me put it another way. Is anything off the table? Is anything ring-fenced? For example, Auckland Airport shares, is that ring-fenced? Is the Portland ring-fenced? Is anything off the table?
I believe we should look at all options.
Including the ones I've just named?
Including the ones you just named. But I have given a commitment to support the Mayor on keeping the Portland in public ownership.
So he is suggesting in his statement making head office savings, operational efficiencies, relentless scrutiny of council-controlled organisations. That's not going to get you to 270 million, is it? You're going to have to make some tougher choices than that.
Well, you'd be surprised, Lisa. Let's watch this space, as they say.
So do you think you can do that within the parameters I've just outlined?
I think we're going to give it a good show. As I said, this is a large hole which is mainly driven from circumstances outside our control. It's really inflationary and around rapid increases in interest and depreciation. And we really have to look. Everyone's hurting. Everyone's hurting. And I just don't think that there's absolutely no desire in my mind, nor I believe in the Mayor's, for putting just that problem directly on ratepayers. None at all. And I really want to give Aucklanders that confidence. You know, Council, as I said, Council has made some savings and efficiencies last term. We've done what we would like to call the low-hanging fruit. And I believe there is more to find. I'll leave it there, Lisa. Is that okay?
Are you going to be the chair of the Finance Committee?
The committee structure hasn't been finalised yet.
Would you like that job again?
The committee structure hasn't been finalised yet.
Desley, you once said to me before, if someone asks you to do something, you're not inclined to turn it down. So if you're invited for that job, would you take it?
Yes, I would.
Hey, this is the first time we've had an opportunity to speak to you since you got the job of Deputy Mayor, so congratulations. And obviously, I've noticed that the Mayor gets some lovely sparkly chains. What do you get as Deputy Mayor? Badge? Anything?
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. More hard work, commitment to assist Auckland go forward.
And that's Auckland's Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson. It is 13 minutes after 5. Let us know your thoughts on that. What do you think's a fair and reasonable rate rise for Auckland? Where should that $270 million shortfall come from? What would you cut? What would you keep? And why? Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A Whangārei Girls High student is asking Parliament to help feed about 300 peers she says are turning up without any food each day. Ocean Bishop Karanga believes the equity criteria used to deliver the Ka Ora, Ka Ako Healthy School Lunches program is missing some of the people who need it most. Katie Todd has the story.
It's 8:45 in the morning at Whangārei Girls High School and students are streaming through the gates. But something important is missing from as many as 1 in 5 backpacks, as these students explain.
People don't even bring lunch and stuff. Some of the students don't get food at home and don't get lunches.
Meet Ocean Bishop Karanga, the Year 13 who wants that to change.
It really is important to have food in their stomachs, so instead of, the head spins that they get, empty stomachs, not having proper thinking.
The school has a breakfast club where sponsors provide free toast, Milo and Wheat Bix. But Ocean Bishop Karanga discovered it doesn't qualify for the government's Ka Ora, Ka Ako Healthy School Lunches program, which delivers free meals to 960 schools nationwide. The program's intended to reach the 25% of children facing the greatest socio-economic barriers, mostly through equity index data from the Ministry of Education. Ocean Bishop Karanga thinks that's unfair because the data doesn't take into account the mixed demographic profile and inequality of Whangārei.
Well, see, because we've been identified as a number one school who has a lot of money in economics, so we weren't qualified for the healthy lunches, free lunches in our school. And it sucks that they put us in that category because not many of us, of course we do come from financial homes, but not everyone has the same economic rating as everyone else.
Ocean Bishop Karanga and her peers asked MP for Whangārei, Labour's Dr Emily Henderson, how they could get the free lunches criteria changed. Dr Henderson suggested putting pen to paper and collecting signatures, noting the parliamentary petitions process is taken extremely seriously. When Dr Henderson next visited the school, Ocean Bishop Karanga and her peers had jumped into action.
They hand across the table the draft of what is now their petition. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck. It was so good. And they had thought it through so carefully. From that, they worked with their principal. They went out to their classmates. And when I went back last time, a couple of days ago, they hauled me into another meeting with Ocean. I swear she's a foot taller. And they have already got 1,000 signatures.
Ocean Bishop Karanga wants free lunches made available to at least 600 students at her school, so the 300 who need it most will comfortably meld into a crowd of other students. That may take some time, according to a statement from Associate Education Minister Jan Tinetti. She said to include more schools in the initiative, more funding would be needed, which is something for next year's budget process. By that time, Ocean Bishop Karanga will be part of the army, having just finished her final NCEA exams and reached the end of her schooling years. She's promising to keep the pressure on. She wants to leave a legacy behind of full pukus, perhaps even at other schools too.
And I do want to help. I want to be able to get access for free kai in our school. That'll be such an accomplishment if we do have it. And then we'll be able to take it on to Boys High because I was having a conversation with the principal and hopefully we can get it into their school as well. And if we have success here, I'm sure every other school that wants to participate in it will get success as well.
The petition is open until the end of the month.
Katie Todd reporting there. The 7-day rolling average of COVID cases has risen more than 60% since September, while hospitalisations and death rates are increasing with a third wave underway. Experts are warning many people will have waning immunity due to long gaps between boosters and past infections as new strains of the virus begin to circulate overseas. It's prompting calls for mask mandates to return and boosters to be rolled out faster. Louise Tanuth reports.
In the past week, there's been 20,802 new cases of COVID-19, with 15% of those reinfections. 322 people are in hospital and a further 8 in ICU. 13 people have died from COVID in the last week. Epidemiologist Michael Baker says hospitalisation rates are reaching the same level they were between the first and second wave.
Every case in hospital is occupying a bed that would rather have available for elective surgery and other conditions. This infection, by the end of the year, is going to be responsible perhaps for 2,500 deaths in total, pushing it into being amongst the leading causes of death in New Zealand this year.
While Omicron is still the dominant strain, variants like XBB and BQ.1 are rising overseas, evading the population's existing immunity. He says we should be looking to Australia, where masks are still required on public transport and domestic flights. With recorded case numbers likely not a true representation, he's suggesting a grading system with a scale of 1 to 5 for people to evaluate their risk during the summer period.
If the level of risk rises, then we do have to have some graded response. We have to do more, not just say nothing's changed. I think we do need a simple system that everyone agrees, and hopefully all our politicians get together and say this is not a political football. This is something that is about saving lives in New Zealand.
The latest update from the Ministry of Health shows 73% of people over 18 have had their first booster and 41% of people over 50 and eligible for their second have had it. For many people, it's been a long time since their last vaccine.
Oh my god, I did. I don't remember when it was.
In August. It was actually my second booster.
Start of this year, I would say, yeah, probably February.
I think it was earlier this year, maybe May, something like that. To keep my dad safe mainly. He's immunocompromised, so definitely take another one if they rolled another one out.
That's something immunologist Anna Brooks wants to see happen, with boosters made available earlier for those that don't qualify yet.
Essentially, anyone who wants to be boosted should really have access to do so, especially if you've only had one boost, especially as we say, if your last boost was so long ago, because it does enhance your protection, at least in the immediate term.
Vaccinologist Helen Patoussis-Harris says it would help in the short term.
Look, it's probably going to help with infection for a short time, because the thing that prevents infection is having antibody already at the ready to go. So if you want to prevent infection, that is your best option available at the moment.
Other countries have started to roll out a bivalent vaccine, which includes 2 strains of the virus, the original Delta and Omicron, which is now dominating. She says changing to a bivalent vaccine would be beneficial.
There seems to be some benefit, and certainly when you measure people's immune response to the vaccines that have got the 2 different variants in. There's not so much data on how much extra protection that provides against severe disease in particularly younger people. But when they come, there might be an advantage to it.
With reinfection rates set to rise, Anna Brooks is urging people not to get complacent.
The more infections you get, the more risk you have for long-term health implications. We don't expect everyone will be reinfected. I think it's going to be a susceptibility thing. We are already hearing people on their second, third infections. That's absolutely going to be something that is far more common. All we can hope is that we can have some surveillance going on so that we can get a better handle on what's happening.
Clear signs the virus is certainly not over.
Louise Tanuth reporting there, 21 after 5, and it's time to get to some of your feedback already coming in on the Auckland rates issue and that black hole in the budget, or should we call it a red one. This person says, why my rates increased 22% this year, not happy for another increase. Another listener says, Auckland could perhaps sell Watercare as an asset that is going to be taken off them by Three Waters. Terry, on the other hand, says Auckland rates are so low compared with the rest of the country, they should be increased by 15%. No more government handouts for Auckland until that happens. And Katrina from Whangārei says councils around the water are going to face the same issues. Her suggestion is that rather than burdening ratepayers further, you should take a 2% tax on all property sales, I'm presuming that's in the Auckland area, and give the recouped money to the local authority. Keep it coming, 2101 on text. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program. Do get in touch on the next wave of COVID. Some people getting infected for a second and third time. Do you still wear your mask And do you think we need more mandates for masks? 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And Evie's standing here with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The principal of a South Auckland school has just confirmed that one of their pupils is the child missing after a boating tragedy on Manukau Harbour. A boat carrying 5 passengers capsized off Clark's Beach in the Manukau Harbour on Sunday evening. Police say 1 person died, 1 was rescued, 2 swam ashore, but 1 is still missing. Auckland's Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says it's not her intention to burden ratepayers with steep rates rises to combat a tripling of the council's budget shortfall. Come next year, it's estimated the city's coffers will be $270 million in the red. She told Checkpoint all options to plug the budget gap are being considered. The judge and jury in a murder trial in Whangārei have returned after being hurried out when aggression broke out in the public gallery. 2 brothers are on trial in the High Court at Whangārei, accused of murdering 23-year-old Hayes P. Hopa in June last year. The Prime Minister is accusing banks making mega profits of not serving communities struggling with the cost of living. Westpac today reported its annual earnings had risen by 12%, hitting just over $1 billion. And Apple says customers should expect longer wait times to receive its latest products. The tech giant's assembly factory in China is operating at a significantly reduced capacity after officials locked down the district due to an outbreak of COVID-19. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 6 in Winton, Lawnville Road is still closed, probably overnight, between Eglinton Street and Thompson Crossing East Road because of a crash. A reminder that Karangahake Gorge on State Highway 2 is closed tonight from 8 until 5 in the morning, and in Wellington, Remutaka Hill is closed from 9 till 4 in the morning. I'll have more news headlines and traffic for you at 5:40.
Kia ora rā, Eho. It's a big week for the Black Ferns as they ready for a sold-out Eden Park for their Rugby World Cup final against England. Wayne Smith has played a big part in reviving the Black Ferns after a horror end to 2021. He stepped into the role in April, and Black Ferns forward Amy Rule says he was initially taken aback by how the women are off the field.
It was definitely a bit of a culture shock for Smithy coming into this environment because we're all very big personalities, we're all very different. We love to dance, well, I say we, I'm not very coordinated, but dancing, music, that connection's really important. I think that's like difference from the men's game, like Gideon, they're like usually headphones on, real focus. We're focused too. We've got the music playing, we're connecting with each other, and I think that's throughout all stages of rugby. It's just always come with us, so it's a big part of that. And I think that culture, music, and just laughing, I would say, is a real key point for our team and a big part of the success we have.
And we're joined now by our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. Do you reckon Wayne dances along with them, Felicity?
Maybe not quite like the Crusaders coach with the breakdancing, maybe not quite like that.
Maybe something a little bit more subtle. How much credit can be given to Wayne Smith for this turnaround?
Wayne Smith really did come in at one of the lowest points for the Black Ferns. That was on the back of that culture review earlier this year. It was a tough time to be taking over a team, but he has sort of really embraced it. I think as you're hearing from Amy speaking there, it's a different environment to what he'll have been used to as an All Blacks assistant coach. He just described throughout this tournament his own learning curve about what it's like to coach men and women. He describes it as men need to play well to feel good. Women need to feel good to play well. So this is a lot about that, like boombox on the bus or dealing with those personalities that Amy was just talking about. Might seem like surface things, but when you're together for 6 weeks during a World Cup, living out of each other's pockets, those things become quite important. And given the history of the Black Ferns and some of the disconnect between the players and the management, I think it's really important. He will have had like the benefit of having that review and knowing the areas that needed to be addressed and what maybe he needed to do to get the Black Ferns on board so that they could defend the world title.
Yeah, so does anything change with the team ahead of the final?
Short answer is no. When you've won 5 in a row, you don't change much. But it's about not being overwhelmed by the occasion and actually not straying from that game plan that's got them those wins. I'd spoken to coaches and players and everyone's really been putting that emphasis over the last couple of days is this week it doesn't change. They are aware that there are going to be more eyes on them this weekend, obviously, but no, nothing changes for them in that case. There'll be a little bit of like downloading and training and their Fords coach Whitney Hansen did say that there would be a lot more homework this week, given England are world number one.
More homework. Thanks, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. A millions-year-old fossil hacked out of rock at a South Island beach has been found after police searched a granity property. The whale fossil, believed to be about 23 million years old, was taken from Little Whangārei beach over Labour weekend. Police are still investigating and no charges have been laid. But the fossil's disappearance upset some locals who have visited the site for generations, and it sparked an ownership debate. Local resident Tom Horncastle wants the fossil returned to its original spot.
Well, I've known about this rock for 60 years and, taken my kids and my grandkids and lots of other kids from the school and that there over the years.
So what did you think when someone swiped it?
Well, I wasn't very happy when I heard about it. I was at home when I heard that someone was down there cutting the rock, and I knew exactly what they were doing then because where they were told. So I went straight down. I yelled at them across the creek, and they more or less waved me away and said to come across. So I went and got my boat, which was up the bank, and another two joggers were standing on the beach there came across with me. So yeah, that's about. And we had a discussion, but they reckon they had iwi rights and they had rights to take that rock. So we, on a Sunday we couldn't prove anything, so we walked away.
So Tom, just so people understand it, it's a millions of years old fossil, a whale fossil, well, stuck into the rock. So how was it taken away? Did they just hack it with something?
They had a rock cutting saw there, like a chainsaw with a big blade on it that cuts into the rock, and they cut right round this thing and then chiselled it out with a chisel and hammer. Now, I didn't see I seen where they'd cut, but I didn't see them take it right out, so I don't know whether they broke it or not. But apparently the police have got 3 rocks back from them, so I don't know whether that's whether it's in pieces or whether there was 2 other rocks there. I'm not sure.
So they came pretty prepared to take it.
Oh, they were ready. They'd been out the Saturday and had a look and taken one on the Saturday, and then they come out on the Sunday and took the big one.
Whereabouts is this in relation to your property?
It's about 500 metres away from my property that looks out over the mouth of Whangārei. I can see it. I could actually see them if I was looking, but I wasn't looking that day. I was downstairs. Yeah,
so I understand locals were not happy about this. I mean, what did this fossil mean to people?
Well, a lot of people probably didn't know about it in Karamea, but there's a lot of people that did, and it meant a lot to people to be able to take their kids and grandkids and families. It's a hard rock to get to. Like you'd only get there at low tide. You either had to boat across or walk a K and a half round from the subdivision. It was just something that was good to have, and it's been there for that many years. I don't think it really should have been touched myself.
Yeah, so a local treasure. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I would say.
So the police...
23, they told me that it would deteriorate, but I mean, I said, well, I didn't know about the 23 million years then. I only thought it was thousands of years. So I said to them, it's been there thousands of years now and it hasn't deteriorated, so just leave it alone. But they were quite content to take it. So
I know it's raised a big debate about who owns these things, but as we understand it, the police have found it, right? Recovered it during a search warrant. What would you like to see happen with it?
Oh, it's got to come back to Karamea. It's the only place it should belong. It's part of our history here. If it goes to another museum, I don't think that's really fair. I think it should come back to Karamea. We've got a museum here. We've got an information centre. We've got lots of places that we could put it and look after it. We've even discussed it with a big company about gluing it back into the same spot, which they reckon they've got a glue that can do it. But, yeah, we're sceptical about that. We'll have to wait and see. We've got to wait and see if we own it yet. We just don't know what's going to happen. I only heard today from the police that they've got it.
But several pieces. Will you be a bit miffed if it's busted up?
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy. I just hope we get it. There's probably a lot of people going to put their hands out and try and grab it now, so we'll just see what happens from here.
But Tom, you reckon it belongs to the community and should go back where it came from?
I'm bloody sure of that.
And that's Tom Horncastle. It is 28 minutes to 6. Kia amo tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai anei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me in the studio. Okay, so the Prime Minister's hit out at the banks and their profits, yeah?
Yes, well, it happened following the announcement today from Westpac on their full year result. They made $1 billion in their net profit. That's an increase of 12% on the year earlier. However, the cash profit's a little bit different. And when you exclude one-time items of 126, is it, million, you find that the bank's cash profit was a drop over the year earlier. So it was down 2% when those one-time items are excluded. So you have to ask yourself, what is the Prime Minister talking about? This is what she had to say.
But not everything that should change will change at the hands of government. It is not unusual, of course, for companies or indeed other operators in our communities to assess whether or not what they're doing at any given time is the right way from a corporate responsibility perspective to be behaving. It doesn't always take government intervention for that kind of self-reflection to occur. I think it's time the banks operating in New Zealand did that very thing.
Well, there you go. So what were the banks doing with all this money? Interestingly, ASB today announced that they are providing a 1% three-year fixed-term loan to customers who want to buy, like, say, an EV or invest in energy efficiency for their home. So it's kind of like a green loan. 1% is the interest rate they're charging for 3 years fixed. Westpac tells us that they charge 0% interest to homeowners who want to do some energy repairs or energy upgrades to their home. And that's a 0% on loan up to $40,000. So ASB's is 1% on $80,000. So you might argue, well, that is something that they're giving back to their customers. But both the ANZ Bank, which reported last week a $2.3 billion profit, and Westpac have both set aside quite a lot of money for the provisions of bad debt and have put in place programs to help customers, asking them, get in touch with us earlier than later if you are having any kind of financial problem. So when you think the ANZ put aside $751 million, Westpac put $439 million aside. You have to kind of say that they're anticipating that there's going to be some hard times for their customers.
And they were told to bolster their capital.
They were. And not only that, KPMG, who do a regular review, have said that really a lot of the bank's profits, and they have been hefty, coincide, of course, with a very strong uplift in the housing market during the financial year ending September 30th. For example, in October, according to the Real Estate Institute, I did some digging back there, the prices rose 30% year on year. So, it coincides with what we're seeing in the banks. Last week, I spoke with Antonia Watson, who's the chief executive of ANZ, and she said that banks really reflect economic times. And she said dark clouds are gathering on the horizon in terms of where the banks are seeing things going. And certainly there was warnings there from Westpac too. So overall, it's hard to know what people really think about this. Banks make money when people are making money, I guess.
They will tell us what they think. 2101 on text.
There you go.
Stand by for the tsunami.
Tsunami. Well, I'm only reporting the news. I'm not making it.
And the short version of it is it's complicated.
It is complicated.
Okay. So upcoming mini corporate reporting season is underway. What can we expect from others when it comes to their profit?
Well, there you go. Let's not just talk about the banks. So I spoke with an equity analyst earlier about so we got the mini reporting season. That's not as big as the one for June 30 balance date, but it's certainly quite large when you talk about September. And we've got like banks and we've got transport, some of the big names, we had Westpac today. We're going to have BNZ on Wednesday. We're going to have Fisher & Paykel. We're going to have Infratil, Main Freight, big companies. So what's expected from them? Well, according to analysts, they're expecting the rearview mirror to show pretty good earnings. But the time ahead, that's going to be what shareholders are watching. What are the outlooks for these companies? And the ones that are consumer-facing, those are the ones that have to deal with consumers and hope that they're going to buy their products or services, are going to be the ones that are going to have the hardest time. I spoke with Rod Duke again last week about his results. Yeah, Briscoe Group. And he was saying, well, for their customers, they don't see their products like irons and, what have you, rice cookers, I suppose, are staples, not luxuries. And so people will still spend money on that. People are also spending money on sporting goods. But will they spend money on like a new car? Not necessarily. I spoke also with Turner's not so long ago, and they were suggesting that secondhand cars are going to be in strong demand because people simply aren't buying new cars right now. So it's a mixed result. The outlook is not as positive as where we have been, and anyone can see that our economy had been strong over some time, but ahead, no, it's a lot of question marks there. We've seen that, and certainly it's reflected in our markets.
Okay, give us the market numbers.
Okay, so we rose 0.5%. That's the top 50 index to 60-point gain to 11,290. There was a bit of a rally in the Kiwi over the weekend, sort of when the market closed, and that was because there was this hope that China was going to ease their restrictive policies on COVID. Now that they threw cold water on that changed the complexion of the markets very quickly. So we were up as high as 59.35 US cents over the weekend. Today, we're just touching that 59 US cent mark, 91.7 Australian and 52 British pence. It's going to be another interesting week.
Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Let's stick with a semi-business theme and go to some of your feedback about rates. And this is the big the big hole, the fiscal hole in Auckland Council's budget, $270 million short for next year. One listener says, how come the Mayor isn't fronting the budget shortfall himself? We spoke to Desley Simpson, the Deputy Mayor. Ian says, put the $270 million in perspective, Lisa, as a percentage of the total annual Auckland Council operating and capital budget, 3.5%, says Ian. Peter says, take GST off rates, or at least all GST taken from rates to be remitted back to the council. Someone had a 33% rate increase. Couldn't help but feel that 2021 valuations, particularly in traditionally poorer areas, are a pretty cynical move on council's part, and new rates increase in the pipeline. Auckland go with three waters and save money, another person says. On the subject of COVID, this listener says, I do still wear a mask, and yes, they should be mandatory again. A couple of exclamation marks pushed in there. This person says, I wear a mask indoors in public places and avoid indoor cafes. Never go to the cinema. Air quality in New Zealand retail settings is abysmal, they say. It is 20 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. 2101 on text. You can tell us what you think of that bank profit as well. Prime Minister, well, I suppose she's calling it out, talking about social licence to continue at those rates. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anea iwi mena pita kōrero.
Auckland's Deputy Mayor says waterfront land occupied by the port will be off the table when the council looks at potential asset sales and a rate rise to balance its books. Come next year, it's estimated the city's coffers will be $270 million in the red due to COVID revenue drops and rapid inflation and interest rate rises. A primary school in South Auckland has confirmed one of its students is missing after a boat capsized in Manukau Harbour yesterday. Sandspit Road School's principal, Sharon de Jong, says the Waiuku community is devastated. The boat carrying 5 people capsized off Clark's Beach. National's deputy leader says next year's election will be very close. The latest News Hub Reid research poll shows Labour has dropped 5.9 points to 32.3% support, well below the National Party on 40.7%. Early childcare centres say they need more support from government, and better subsidies for families are only part of the solution. Childcare subsidies will increase from next April, but Montessori Chief Executive Kathy Wilson says the subsidies won't equate to higher profits for a sector which is already struggling. And the United States has paused all travel to Antarctica as its research station deals with a surge in COVID cases. More than 70 people, about 10% of the workforce, now have COVID-19 at McMurdo Station, Antarctica, New Zealand, says Scott Base, which neighbours McMurdo, is currently COVID-free. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, Lawnville Road is closed on State Highway 6 in Winton between Eglinton Street and Thompson Crossing East Road because of a crash. All other routes appear to be moving normally around the country, apart from closures on Karangahake Gorge, State Highway 2 and Wellington's Dimutaka Hill tonight, both for maintenance. I will have news and weather for you at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. The Labour Party's playing down its sharp drop in support in the latest political poll, saying the result should be taken with a grain of salt. The News Hub Reid research poll has Labour sitting around 32%, trailing National, which is registering just over 40%. It's the worst result for Labour since Jacinda Ardern took over as leader in 2017 and would allow National and ACT to govern alone. And it came just hours after the governing party wrapped up an annual conference making the case for re-election next year. Anei te kairi poata a Jane Patterson, our political editor.
The answer is Labour.
Jacinda Ardern firing up the base and pitching for a third term in government.
The answer is Labour because we have been here before.
While party members might be showing enthusiasm for another term of Labour, the polls not so much.
The mood of the country has turned against Labour, according to our latest News Hub Reid research poll. Voters want a change of government.
Ms Ardern's emphasised the numerous challenges Labour has faced, urging voters to judge the party on its track record through adversity. She says she takes polling with a grain of salt, given they're so infrequent at the moment, preferring instead to heed the party's internal polling, which shows Labour much closer to National.
Our show we are neck and neck. So that's where I see that we are currently, and that seems a pretty accurate reflection probably of the mood right now. But we are roughly 12 months away from an election.
National's Deputy Nicola Willis responding cautiously.
This is one poll with a good result for us. We expect the polls to go up and down. But what we think next year's election will be like, very, very close.
Both ACT and the Greens picked up some support. Greens co-leader Marama Davidson says their polling has been consistently equal to or even above their 2020 election result.
Which historically for a smaller party in government is actually we've broken through that and we're proving that over 2 terms now.
Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngāri-Wapaka also happy with the consistency of support.
We are being supported, but most importantly, what we've seen on the ground and the participation and support that we're receiving is second to none.
ACT's David Seymour says there's a clear mood for change.
But let's just remember there's 12 months to go and an awful lot of work, not only to change the government, but to make sure that change is real and meaningful.
Voted out of Parliament in 2020, New Zealand First registered 3.3% support in this poll, inching closer to the 5% threshold needed to make a comeback. Leader Winston Peters says the party's feeling rejuvenated.
All we have to do is keep our ears open on our listening to it and work hard and we are confident of the outcome.
The poll also asked who people would prefer as Prime Minister. While both Ms Ardern and National's Christopher Luxon took a dip, she's still ahead by about 8 points at just below 30%. Also registering were Nicola Willis, David Seymour, Winston Peters and Chloe Swarbrick.
And that was Jane Patterson reporting. A child is missing after a boating accident in Auckland last night. The boat carrying 5 passengers capsized off Clark's Beach in the Manukau Harbour. The principal of Sandspit Road School in Waiuku says one of their pupils is missing and the school is devastated. Our reporter Felix Walton has more.
The boat capsized at about 7 o'clock last night. Police say 1 person died, 1 was rescued and 1 is still missing. 2 others swam to shore looking for help, where resident Rachel Speedy spotted them. Both were suffering from hypothermia after spending hours in the freezing water.
And so we got everybody up here. We wrapped them in blankets and got them warm. They were frozen. They'd been in the water for 5 hours and they had hung on to the boat until they realised the tide was turning, and then they swam with the tide to get help for their friends.
Ms Speedy lives near the shore and is all too familiar with accidents in Manukau Harbour.
Yeah, it's been very, very stressful. It's been a horrific accident, and I just hope that people really think about safety this summer in boats and swimming. Even though the Manukau Harbour looks as though it's very calm and safe, it can also be deadly.
One passenger was airlifted to Middlemore Hospital. Search crews are looking for the fifth passenger, who RNZ understands is of primary school age. One member of the search party, scanning the harbour with binoculars, says he's been searching since the early morning.
Yeah, we're just looking for the last person.
And do you know the person, the family of the person who is still missing? How are they doing?
Pretty upset, yeah.
Manukau Ward Councillor Lotu Foley says she's devastated to see another incident in her area. She says the harsh conditions on Manukau Harbour are an ongoing problem.
Just last year, there were maybe up to five people who passed away last year on the Manukau Harbour, because the bar there, the Manukau Harbour bar, is notorious for boats lodging themselves on that bar or becoming capsized as a result.
Coast Guard Waiuku President Dean Lawrence says the sandbar in Manukau Harbour is a known risk and creates high waves that challenge even experienced boaters. But he says the vessel, which tipped near Clark's Beach, wasn't close to the bar when it capsized.
I'm unsure as to what caused it to capsize. It was not crossing the Manukau Bar, which is where some things have happened in the past.
Rachel Speedy says the incident is a reminder for boaters to be careful even when the conditions seem good.
And that's what's deceiving about the harbour, is that people look at it and they think that it's a nice, serene place to go boating, and then they realise quite quickly that it can change so quickly.
Maritime NZ spokesperson Matt Wood says unexpected capsizes are a leading cause of fatalities in recreational boating.
That can happen for a number of reasons. It can be the state of the sea, the size of the waves, the size of the vessel, the way the vessel is loaded. There's a number of things, even poor maintenance. For instance, if you've got a leaky boat, that can destabilise the vessel.
Matt Wood says it's important to check conditions before setting out, but also to be prepared for emergencies at unexpected times.
It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. You've got strong opinions on the banks on both sides of the fence. This is in respect of Westpac reporting a profit of around $1 billion. Johnny says not good for banks making profits while removing branches from the regions. Why can't some profits go towards accessibility for rural and marginalised clients? Andrew says, as a bank shareholder, I expect good profits and strong dividends. Lawrence says $1 billion profit equals dark clouds on the horizon. I don't think so, reckons Lawrence. And Andrew says, when a bank fails, I don't think there will be any social licence. Keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The government's being told to make the process for applying for childcare costs easy so it can make it into the pockets of those it's being designed to help. More families are set to qualify for support to cover the cost of childcare from April next year. The government says its policy will mean more than half of all New Zealand families with children will be eligible for a subsidy. Kate Green reports.
The cost of childcare is one expense the government hopes it can cut down for half of Kiwi families as it battles the cost of living crisis. Cheryl Wilson, Chief Executive of Kids First Kindergartens, says the new policy will particularly help middle-income families.
So we have a number of our kindergartens that get additional funding from government because of the low social economic areas that they serve. But then there's another area of communities that could certainly benefit from additional funding.
But she can't understand why the changes are so far off.
My question is, why announce it now and then get families to wait for 6 months till the 1st of April when these families really need support now?
Cheryl Wilson says applying for a WINS subsidy isn't an easy process, especially for families for which English is a second language, and she hopes the system will be able to support an increase in applicants. Bethany Fox, president of the Home-Based Association, says the childcare sector will also need more resources to keep up with demand.
the government announcing more assistance is a positive, but there's still that demand and strain on the sector of needing more teachers. So it's a catch-22 as well. Yes, there's more availability to help parents and whānau, but we need more teachers.
Bethany Fox says it will potentially allow providers to qualify for more funding, as children are booked in for more hours each week. But Montessori Chief Executive Kathy Wilson says the subsidies won't equate to higher profits for the sector.
Our early childhood members are really, really struggling. They've been absorbing more and more costs and not passing these on in fee increases, despite the impact of ongoing losses with the lockdown, illnesses, and general day-to-day increases that we've all been feeling.
Dr Carmen Daly from Victoria University says the policy may give centres more certainty about their income and ability to employ staff. But finding those staff is another issue.
Well, I'm hoping that the government has other initiatives in place to deal with that side of the problem. So this is just one part of the problem that currently is being experienced in early childhood settings.
Subsidies will alleviate pressure for families, but the government's being told teacher pay and staff shortages are other issues that need its attention.
A pigeon punami is plaguing, or should we say coating, Onehunga Town Centre in Auckland. The local business association says the spread of faecal matter is getting to extraordinary levels. It's prompted a campaign warning people not to feed the bothersome birds, and the pigeon police are on patrol. Amanda Wellgreen from the Onehunga Business Association reckons there are up to 300 of the birds.
It's definitely something that I have noticed increasing over the last few months, is that pigeons are roosting in a number of the properties along Onehunga Mall, and they seem to be encouraged by some residents, I believe, feeding them at different locations, not on the main street but behind it. So apparently, according to Pest Management, they like to be fed away from where they live, and then they settle down where it's suitable, and that's where they leave their healthy faeces deposits all over the footpath of Onehunga Mall, which has become a bit of a problem for us.
In what way? Give us an idea of the level of coverage, smell, density, spread, all the details.
Well, needless to say, it's bad. The council washes the footpaths once a month for us, and in that time it can build up quite a lot. We had a pregnant lady who was walking down one side of the street who slipped over in it, so it can build up in a number of places. The smell I haven't noticed as much. It can be the noise. Pigeons make a lot of noise when they're sitting around, and we walked around last week, and there's just various spots where they've settled themselves in for a cosy night with their family to listen to you, Lisa. So we're having just lots of problems in various places. And now we've got new residents that are moving in, new developments happening in the town centre. We've had one particularly motivated gentleman who's taken it on to rid Onehunga of pigeons, and has turned up to my office a couple of times with fantastic photos of these people who are feeding them, and they're the pigeons are sitting on these women's bodies while they give them the food that they are all after. I guess maybe there's some company, but as far as I'm concerned, they're really unhealthy and disgusting.
So you've got two schools there, the people who are cultivating the pigeons and the pigeon vigilantes.
Yes, and we've got to be very careful that we don't upset anybody, but at the same time, health and safety is my priority, and making sure that Onehunga is a great place to visit. We have events that happen in the town centre, and I don't want people to be put off because there's pigeon poop everywhere.
Yeah, and as you point out, it can be dangerous, slipping over. That's not good. So what are you telling people about how to deal with these, well, some people call them rats of the sky, right? So what should they do?
Rats. So we are talking to people about trying to not feed them. We've got a number of locals who are also looking out for us, including the community constable. We're just keeping an eye out for people. We're talking to pest management about different solutions, including relocation and deterrence. I know some of our property owners have put up spikes, which are great. They look terrible. I remember working in Wellington many years ago, and the Civic Centre was covered in spikes because they were having so many problems with pigeons roosting all around the civic centre. So the spikes are effective, but they just shift the problem from one area to another. I was made aware that there's like little fake animals that are appearing to try and keep pigeons away, like a scarecrow. So, yeah, everyone's coming up with different solutions, and we're just hoping that together we can try and rid Onehunga of the 200 to 300 birds that we have in the town centre.
So, Amanda, you actually have the pigeon police, but in addition to that, are you getting pest controllers in?
We have been talking to them, yes.
I know you've got your Christmas parade coming soonish. You won't want to be rained on, will you?
No, that would be a terrible situation. Is to have I think we have up to sort of 500 participants in our Christmas parade, and to have pigeons pooping on their heads would not be fun for anyone. So we are hoping that over November that we can at least eliminate a large number of the problems that we're facing at the moment.
Amanda, we noticed at the end of your newsletter there were some pigeon jokes.
That was not me.
Because I was going to ask you for your best one, Amanda. Have you got your best pigeon joke ready?
What's a pigeon's favourite social media platform, Lisa?
I don't know, Amanda. Tell me.
Well, he has a small brain, dumb opinions, and often gets into a flap about nothing. In other words, he loves Twitter.
Ba-dum-bum-ch.
That's terrible.
And that was Amanda Whangārei from the Onehunga Business Association. We would love your feedback on that one. They're looking at relocation, they're using spikes, they're using other fake animals to get rid of them. Suggestions, please. Can you make them humane? 2101 on text. Isn't being pooped on, Evie, by birds, isn't that a sign of good luck?
That is absolutely good luck, but perhaps not if it was a kiddo, like those native pigeons. You pretty much need a head-to-toe raincoat because there's so much poo in a wood pigeon.
And how do you feel about normal pigeons?
Yeah, a lot of people where I live feed them, love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not me.
Not you. And they're, as we said, described by some people as, rats with wings. Let us know your thoughts on that one. Lawrence has got in touch and says, I vote for pigeon for next year's Bird of the Year. You're really stirring the muck with that one, aren't you, Lawrence? On the subject, before we get to the banks, the police in Taupō have executed a policing operation over the weekend. Results, not flash. 3,900 drivers were stopped at checkpoints in Taupō over the weekend. There were 25 drivers processed for excess breath alcohol over 2 nights. Sergeant Mark Holmes says it's incredibly concerning to be locating even one driver with excess breath alcohol. And if you're going to be enjoying a few drinks, make sure you have a plan to get home or a sober driver, because it is pretty much that time of the year at the moment, and there are going to be more checkpoints, I imagine. On the subject of bank profits, Kelly says... this is yet another trickle-up system. Who pays the interest and who makes it? What kind of society does shareholder Andrew want to be part of? That was someone who said they want the banks to make profit. Another one says obscene profits from Australian banks.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Kia ora, good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister is accusing banks making mega profits of not serving communities struggling with the cost of living. Bank profits are surging, with predictions the sector is set to post an annual profit of $10 billion. Westpac today reported its annual earnings had risen by 12%, hitting just over $1 billion. Jacinda Ardern says banks are operating within the rules but aren't using social licence. She says the government doesn't have a solution, but it's time banks operating in New Zealand consider if they're behaving the right way. Auckland Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says it's not her intention to burden ratepayers with steep rates rises to combat a tripling of the council's budget shortfall. Come next year, it's estimated the city's coffers will be $270 million in the red due to COVID-19 revenue drops and rapid inflation and interest rate rises. A planned 3.5% rate rise won't plug the hole, and staff say more of a hike is possible as long as it, quote, doesn't create an unacceptable shock for households and businesses. She says all options to plug the budget gap are being considered, including selling assets. A primary school in South Auckland has confirmed one of its students is the person missing after a boat capsized in Manukau Harbour yesterday. The boat, carrying 5 people, capsized off Clark's Beach. 1 person died and 3 were hospitalised while the search continues for the last missing person. Sandspit Road School's principal, Sharon de Jong, says the Waiuku community is devastated. She says the school is doing everything they can to support students, teachers and the community. Ms de Jong says the Ministry of Education's trauma team is providing support. Police are yet to confirm the age of the missing person. An epidemiologist says mask mandates need to come back on public transport during a third wave of COVID-19. The 7-day rolling average of COVID cases has risen 60% since September, while hospitalisation and death rates are also increasing. Professor Michael Baker says mask mandates are crucial to prevent further spread as the population's immunity wanes.
If you're the only person on the bus with the mask, you're still surrounded by people who may be infectious and firing out the virus. And that's why we've still got mask mandates in hospitals and aged care facilities. We're definitely in another wave of infection and the risk is higher.
While Omicron is still the dominant strain, variants like XBB and BQ.1 are rising overseas, evading the population's existing immunity. The United States has paused all travel to Antarctica as its research station deals with a surge in COVID cases. More than 70 people, about 10% of the workforce, now have COVID-19 at McMurdo Station. The US has paused travel for 2 weeks while it assesses the situation. Antarctica New Zealand says Scott Base, which neighbours McMurdo, is currently COVID-free. Staff are only allowed to visit the station for work purposes and if they're masked up and socially distanced. There is currently no impact on travel to Antarctica for the New Zealand programme. There have been calls at the opening of the COP27 climate summit for richer nations to better help the less privileged. Countries are being urged not to allow the cost of living crisis to distract from climate action. The BBC's Matt McGrath has more.
Small island states say this is just the first step of a major overhaul of how climate finance works. They point to the fact that coal, oil and gas companies have earned more than $2.8 billion a day, every day, for the past 30 years. Many of these island nations are facing rising sea levels that may make their homes uninhabitable. They're also spending large amounts of money, often borrowed, to protect their citizens from other impacts of climate change. They argue that it's still cheaper and faster to get money to destroy the planet than to save it.
The leader of New Zealand First says there's tremendous enthusiasm for his party. Winston Peters and his party were booted out of Parliament by voters at the 2020 election. The latest News Hub Reid research poll shows the party is inching closer to the 5% threshold needed to make a comeback with 3.3% support. Winston Peters says his party is feeling rejuvenated.
All we have to do is keep our ears open on our listening to it and work hard and we are confident of the outcome.
Winston Peters says support for Labour is waning because the party is focusing on pet projects rather than addressing the cost of living. And Apple says customers should expect longer wait times to receive its latest products. The tech giant's assembly factory in China is operating at a significantly reduced capacity after officials locked down the district due to an outbreak of COVID-19. China has reiterated its commitment to a zero COVID policy. That's the news.
Tonight on RNZ National, Karen Hay is back. We continue our fascinating series, The Fridge Light. Episode 2 is all about yeast, which is changing the way we drink and get high. We visit the world's largest peatland in the Congo Basin, and we blow a few trumpets too, with a special insight into brass bands. It's all on Nights with Karen Hay, after 7 here on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on the RNZ app on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, isolated showers turning to scattered rain this evening. Rain becoming widespread for a time tomorrow. Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods tomorrow. A few spots of rain in Auckland and Coromandel. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mainly fine. Evening showers about the ranges, plus central Hawke's Bay and the Taradua district today. Waitomotu, Kapiti, including the central high country. Scattered showers, possibly heavy about the high country tonight and tomorrow night. Wellington, Also, Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine. Showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago, also Westland, Fiordland and Southland, fine breaks. A few showers about Fiordland and coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere this evening. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow. The time is 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland's mayor is promising to find huge cost savings, so a massive financial hole won't be filled by significant rate rises. The hole in the council's budget has tripled in size to $270 million. A planned 3.5% rate rise won't plug the gap, and staff say more of a hike is possible as long as it, quote, does not create an unacceptable shock for households and businesses. Amy Williams reports.
It's a big financial hole the mayor of our biggest city says needs to be filled quickly. The anticipated shortfall of $90 million now looks rosy. Come next year, it's estimated the city's coffers will be a whopping $270 million in the red, thanks to COVID-19 revenue drops and rapid inflation and interest rate rises. Waiuku resident Maxine Malone is among those digesting the $270 million budget hole.
I was shocked to see that much. I was shocked that the super city is in that predicament and there doesn't seem to be any way out of it.
She says any rates increase will hurt her household budget.
What rate are they talking about? Is it 2.5? Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it double digits? We don't know. Because that's more out of our weekly living allowance that we have.
This Franklin resident expects steeper rates rises.
I think it's inevitable. I mean, property rates will have to go up because there's quite a deficit, and I think there's been a lot of wastage there.
The Auckland Council says it has the financial flexibility to mitigate the shortfall, and options include a rates rise, selling assets, delaying capital expenditure and increasing user charges for council services. In a statement, Mayor Wayne Brown says limited rates rises are part of the answer, alongside head office savings, operational efficiencies and lifting the performance of arm's-length organisations, including the port. Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says she'd like to see rates rises capped at 3.5%, but it would be a wider council decision.
Everyone's hurting. And I just don't think that there's absolutely no desire in my mind, nor I believe in the mayor's, for put that problem directly on ratepayers. None at all.
With inflation forecast to have peaked at 7.3% and remain high next year, increased costs are front of mind for South Auckland resident Bas Granand.
As it is, we feel it is too much. We're not getting enough for what they are charging us in rates. I have 2 properties here and I pay like close to $3,000 for both. That's a lot.
The current council's full governing body will discuss the shortfall during its meeting on Thursday. The budget will go out for public consultation early next year before being adopted in June.
I'll only trust the election if my candidate wins. That's the sentiment among a lot of Republican supporters right now ahead of crucial midterm elections in the US. And now former President Donald Trump's already casting doubt on their legitimacy in the critical swing state of Pennsylvania. Here we go again, he wrote on social media, rigged election. President Joe Biden and former President Barack Obama are also campaigning in Pennsylvania, showing just how important it is. The BBC's Sarah Smith has more.
Pennsylvania, where this election is so tight, the president himself is here asking for votes. And he's brought a friend, a Democratic double act.
Well, folks, 3 days until one of the most important elections in our lifetime.
Pennsylvania matters because victory here could give either party a majority in the Senate. And this race is too close to call. So Democrats are raising the stakes.
Truth and facts and logic and reason and basic decency are on the ballot. Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
The campaign message that American freedoms are under threat concerns the committed Democrats who waited hours to see the presidential pair. What's on the line in this election if Democrats lose Congress?
Oh, our democracy is at stake. It truly is.
Why does Pennsylvania matter so much?
Because women matter, because our rights matter, because Black lives matter.
Presidents Biden and Obama can certainly draw a crowd, even though neither of them are standing for election this year. The results, though, they really matter to Joe Biden. They'll determine whether he can or cannot get anything done for the next 2 years. These results also matter to Donald Trump.
Well, thank you very much, and hello, Pennsylvania, one of my favorite places.
In the same state, on the same night, Donald Trump is blaming the Democrats for inflation, increased immigration and rising crime.
If you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, then this Tuesday you must vote Republican in a giant red wave.
Victory here for one of his hand-picked candidates, the TV celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, could spur Trump on to announce soon that he's running for president in 2024. In Georgia, another key state, there is an entire weekend festival devoted to shrimp and grits, a traditional southern dish that tastes better than it sounds. There's also a very tight race for the Senate seat. The Trump-backed candidate here is another celebrity, a former football player, Herschel Walker. He has said he supports a total ban on abortion, but his campaign's been rocked by 2 ex-girlfriends claiming he pressured them into having terminations. Had you heard the news stories about Herschel Walker?
Yep.
Would it put you off voting for him?
No, because he said it wasn't true and it hasn't been proven.
I guess I don't count that kind of stuff because there's no proof. And I know this is such a volatile election that who knows what somebody will be paid to say.
In this incendiary atmosphere, when voters don't know what to believe and leaders warn of the violent threats to democracy itself, the election results may well just ignite further, potentially dangerous division.
People in Kiev are being warned by the city's mayor to be ready to evacuate if there's a total loss of power. Russian airstrikes are increasingly targeting vital infrastructure. Rolling power cuts are underway to avoid overloads and allow for repairs. Nearly half of Ukraine's entire energy system has been damaged or destroyed by Russian attacks. The BBC's Bearu Hunga has more.
Rolling blackouts are already common across Ukraine as engineers struggle to prevent a complete collapse of the electricity grid while Russia continues to launch missiles and drones targeting power plants and transmission infrastructure. Officials in Kiev are planning for the worst-case scenario, a total power failure in the capital. Vitaly Klitschko is asking about 3 million residents to make plans to relocate to the suburbs or further away and live with relatives and friends.
Я також звертаюсь для людей прорахувати, якщо у вас є.
I also want to urge Kyiv residents to consider everything. In the worst case, if we're left without electricity and water, if you have extended family or friends outside Kyiv who have their own water supply, an oven or heating, please keep in mind the possibility of staying there for a certain amount of time.
Another city official has warned that in the case of a total blackout, water supply and sewage would also stop working. The mayor says the authorities are stocking up on fuel, food and water, and residents should do the same. At least 1,000 heating shelters are being set up across the city where people will be able to get warm in an emergency.
The UN's Climate Change Summit has opened in Egypt with a warning that the Earth is sending a distress signal. Over the next 2 weeks, key negotiations between world leaders will take place. One of the key messages is for countries not to allow the cost of living crisis to distract from climate action. The BBC's Justin Rowlett has more from Africa.
Cyclones ripped through Madagascar earlier this year. Floods displaced more than 1 million people in Nigeria last month, while another year of low rainfall pushed parts of Somalia and elsewhere in East Africa even closer to famine. Our planet is sending a distress signal. The UN conference in Egypt was warned.
The last 8 years have been the warmest on record.
making every heat wave more intense and life-threatening, especially for vulnerable populations. Sea levels are rising at twice the speed of the 90s, posing an existential threat for low-lying island states and threatening billions of people in coastal regions.
Representatives of more than 200 nations are attending the talks. It is essential progress is made, they were told.
Whilst I do understand that leaders around the world have faced competing priorities this year, we must be clear. As challenging as our current moment is, inaction is myopic and can only defer climate catastrophe.
But expect heated negotiations. Egypt says the rich world needs to come good on its promises of cash to help developing countries cut carbon and adapt to our changing climate. And there'll be demands for money to help vulnerable nations with the climate-related impacts they are already experiencing. The fear is the talks could be deadlocked. The Ukraine war has driven up food and energy prices worldwide. Developed nations are expected to say they don't have cash to spare.
Many times we've been given commitments and promises, but we haven't been given action. And of course, a promise that is broken, it kind of destroys the trust that we have in our leaders.
You don't have to go far from the coast here in Egypt to find vivid evidence of what's at stake. The Red Sea is home to some of the most magnificent and biodiverse coral reefs in the world, but coral is incredibly vulnerable to climate change. Scientists say virtually all the world's coral reefs could be gone by the end of the century, possibly sooner. Now, think what that means. An ecosystem that's taken hundreds of millions of years to evolve, gone forever.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The UK Prime Minister says abusive text messages sent by a new Cabinet Office Minister to a colleague are unacceptable. A series of expletive-laden texts sent by Sir Gavin Williamson to the former Chief Whip, Wendy Morton, have been published. The BBC's David Wallace-Lockhart has more.
Sir Gavin Williamson was sacked from the Cabinet by Boris Johnson last year. Rishi Sunak made him a minister again earlier this month, the very same day the Prime Minister promised
integrity, professionalism and accountability.
But we now know that Rishi Sunak was aware that Sir Gavin was the subject of an official complaint made by the former Chief Whip, Wendy Morton. Shortly after the death of the Queen, Gavin Williamson texted Ms Morton to accuse her of rigging the process for allocating spaces at Her Majesty's funeral to punish certain MPs. He called this absolutely disgusting. She replied saying that was not the case. In one of a number of texts Sir Gavin sent featuring expletives, he warned her there is a price for everything. Many more messages were exchanged. This morning, Gavin Williamson's departmental boss said Sir Gavin regretted the messages he'd sent.
That's not acceptable. He shouldn't have said it. He has said that he regrets doing so. He has given some context, which was that this was at the time of heightened frustration. It was, remember him as a backbencher to the Chief Whip.
What, so if you're in a bad mood, it's okay to talk like that to a colleague?
This is not acceptable. However, there is this complaints process ongoing, and it was not the case that the Prime Minister had seen this exchange.
But a former Cabinet colleague of Gavin Williamson suggested the Prime Minister doesn't have time for these kinds of scandals.
The texts he sent to the Chief Whip were unacceptable, and I think Rishi Sunak doesn't have the bandwidth for this kind of negative publicity.
Labour are questioning the Prime Minister's judgment.
What it says is that Rishi Sunak was making decisions simply in his own narrow, short-term interests as far as the Conservative Party leadership was concerned, not the national interest.
Rishi Sunak had already faced criticism for reappointing Suella Braverman as Home Secretary shortly after she sent official documents from her personal email. Today's revelations prompt more questions about the team the Prime Minister has assembled.
While the government here has boosted childcare funding for Kiwi parents, low-income families in Australia say they're struggling to balance childcare and work. Economists say it's affecting single mothers the hardest, and improving the system would see more women return to work after giving birth. The ABC's Gabriella Marchant has more.
Brisbane mum Brianna Wilson has seen her son Cade blossom since he started regular childcare.
Oh, he's actually excelled so much. He's talking a lot more, and within I think it was month of him being there, he was actually talking a lot better. And even his teachers, he loves his teachers. He even has a best friend at school, which is amazing for a 3-year-old, I think.
Cade's childcare is heavily subsidised by a not-for-profit organisation. It's the only way Brianna Wilson can afford it, while working casually as a support worker.
I know if Cade wasn't in daycare, I could not work. And not working, you wouldn't be able to live, because I don't know how people... I could not live off the government benefits that I'm having with all the bills that I have. I know I could not do it.
Parents who do casual work face having to pay for childcare without knowing if they're going to pick up a shift. And if they don't meet the so-called activity test for work, they don't qualify for subsidised care. Dr Angela Jackson is the lead economist at Impact Economics and Policy.
So if you're not working enough, you can only access 1 day of care per week. And then as a result, if you get offered that extra shift, you can't take it because you don't have access to childcare. And so what it does is it makes it very difficult, particularly for women, for single mothers in particular, who might be doing that one casual shift a week at the supermarket, to then pick up that extra shift without facing some significant costs. Because to even be available for that shift, they have to pay for childcare, and yet they don't know if they're going to work or not.
The not-for-profit that helps Brianna Wilson and around 900 other parents and 2,500 kids is the Good Start Early Learning Fund. It ensures each child receives at least 2 days of care per week, and it costs parents just $5 a day. Penny Markham launched the fund in 2015.
Families have told us that it has enabled them to look for work, to have the time to look for work, and to actually gain employment, which has been a really exciting outcome.
Revelations of trafficking and exploitation have forced the Australian government to review its migration system. A new report suggests criminals are taking advantage of loopholes while skilled workers and refugees are caught up in chronic visa backlogs. The ABC's Matt Bamford reports.
Zaki Haidari arrived in Australia more than 10 years ago after a perilous boat ride. The Afghan refugee says navigating the migration system has also been a punishing journey.
I, of course, sought protection by arriving to this country, and I didn't have my basic human rights. For example, for 3 years, I was not allowed to work right. I was on a bridging visa with no work rights.
A decade later, he's still waiting to find out if he can stay.
I am going through the immigration system. My visa was expired in September 2020, and I'm still waiting for my new visa to come. So it hasn't been really great, and there's a lot of, problem and issues with that as well.
Australia's migration system has been under intense scrutiny following media reports of widespread rorting. An investigation by 9 publications revealed criminals were exploiting loopholes to traffic vulnerable migrants. Zaki Haidari says it shows there's an urgent need for reform.
What it clearly indicates is that there's lack of resources, there's lack of processes in place that should go through the resources in place, and if the government deliver on their promise and abolish temporary visas and give refugees permanent visas, there's more resources to deal with other visa types and make sure people are protected, their human rights are protected and do have work rights.
As the country continues to face skills shortages and a chronic visa backlog, the government has announced a review into the migration system. Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill told RN Breakfast it's the first of its kind in 30 years.
This system can do so much for our country, but it's not working at the moment for migrants or for the people who need them here to help us. And so what we want to do is really go back to first principles.
She says closing the loopholes will make the system faster and fairer.
So we've got 2 issues here, a system that isn't getting the people into the country that we need, but one that is essentially being used to facilitate wrongdoing.
Violet Romeliotis is from Settlement Services International, which helps migrants to settle in Australia.
I think that in recent years, temporary migration policy settings have been very ad hoc.
and very much focused on short-term needs. And previously, government has failed to recognise the importance of people laying roots in the country and having the opportunity to build a career or a family and ultimately becoming permanent residents and citizens.
The Oscar-winning actress and screenwriter Emma Thompson has turned her hand to writing a festive children's story called Jim's Spectacular Christmas. Her father, Eric Thompson, created the children's TV series The Magic Roundabout in the 1960s, and Emma has also written and featured in several children's stories herself. She spoke to the BBC's Nicola Stanbridge about her new book, starring a lovable dog who lived in London's V&A Museum.
This festive tale marks 170 years of the London V&A. Jim's Spectacular Christmas involves the real-life museum dog helping to make the first commercial Christmas card with the museum's director, Sir Henry Cole. Frequently together, Sir Henry's diary recalls, in museum with Jim, who barked as usual. The tale is reimagined by Emma Thompson from such diaries and drawings.
This collection was so endearing and delicious because it was Henry Cole's sketches of bits and bobs, but also his dog, and it was the first Christmas card, the thing that he'd invented. And then I got intrigued. Henry Cole's pictures of his dog made me like him very much because of his affection for this creature that clearly ran around in the V&A and was a dog that lived in a museum. And then I thought, I think that's the story.
Did your father inspire you? Eric Thompson, who created the adventures of Dougal and Zebedee in the 60s, Magic Roundabout.
I think by never writing down to children, one thing he couldn't bear was being patronised himself. So he often in the Magic Roundabout would use phrases that were not generally used by children's entertainers, like hoist with your own petard, and lots of references to politics of the time.
Children are just people, and if you write a word in one of my scripts which children don't understand, they'll find out. If you don't write the word, they'll never find out. This is why I hate any writing for children which smacks of the cat sat on the mat. Who wants to know about that? Children adore adult things. They're not kids at all. It's all a terrible con trick that the adults are playing on them, and they've got to be very careful. They'll take over one day.
Returning to our Christmas theme, can you set the scene for your intergenerational Christmases? Your daughter and your 90-year-old mother, Philida, always together, are you?
Yes, absolutely. Our family's always together. So, we're all lucky because we've had her in our lives forever. It's a wonderful and I think entirely necessary thing. The way in which we have divided the generations, I think is hugely detrimental to human happiness and the satisfaction of life. From my mother now I learn about how to grow old, and from my daughter I am reminded what it's like to dance as if there were no tomorrow.
Emma Thompson there. One last bit of feedback before we head off on school lunches. This person says maybe some of the masses of school lunches needlessly delivered to many qualifying schools and then thrown away could be diverted to people who would actually benefit from them. Thanks for that bit of feedback. It's about all we've got time for. Late news team, as always, will keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything on Checkpoint, you can check us back out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Apopo tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, talks to National Deputy Leader Nicola Willis. Now we're talking about bank profits, Auckland's financial woes and cups of tea in Epsom. Sounds like it's going to be interesting. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Ka te hoki mai anō Popo whānau po Mārie. Catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says it's time banks operating in New Zealand think about whether they're behaving the right way. Bank profits are surging, with predictions the sector is set to post an annual profit of $10 billion. A primary school in South Auckland has confirmed one of its students is the person missing after a boat capsized in Manukau Harbour yesterday. And an epidemiologist says mask mandates are crucial to prevent further spread as the population's immunity wanes and a third wave of COVID-19 hits. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves, delving deeper into the major Pacific stories of the week in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the region and the world. I bring you interviews with Pacific newsmakers, experts and commentators in their fields, as well as up-to-date coverage from our talented team here at RNZ Pacific and our correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves, 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
Time now for the detail. Tonight, it's less than a year until the next election, and Labour's still got a lot on its legislative agenda this term.
Kia ora, I'm Emile Donovan, and today on The Detail, we're about a year out from the 2023 general election. And after a term dominated by COVID-19, the government is putting the pedal to the metal.
The Fair Pay Agreement Bill passed in Parliament last night. Had another report regarding Three Waters this week.
A new public media giant will be up and running by the middle of next year.
Tangata whenua will have their own health body.
But on current polling, a change of government could be on the cards next year. And if that happens...
By the time we get there in 2023, the reality is that not much will have happened, to be brutally honest with you. So I think it's going to be very easy for us to repeal and unwind.
National and ACT, though, oppose the measures, which they say will hurt small businesses, and they vow to repeal the law if elected next year.
But talking the talk is different from walking the walk. Sometimes pledges to repeal fall by the wayside and into the too hard basket. So today on The Detail, Newsroom political editor Joe Moyer and Stuff political reporter Thomas Manch discuss the big-ticket projects the government hopes to get over the line over the next year and whether they're likely to last if National takes power. Here's Joe Moyer.
I think there is a lot happening, and I think probably the obvious reason for that in the first instance is that we've come out of what has been, 2.5 years of COVID and I guess brakes put on any ability to do anything in particular as the country sort of somewhat ground to a halt there for a while. The government is in a situation now where it's playing a little bit of catch-up